Hey folks, so this is like take 147 of this particular video because I didn't realize how difficult it is to speak to a camera about sex. But a couple of weeks ago in the comments, somebody made mention about virginity and the importance of virginity in the Bible, especially as a social construct. Now, I'm not entirely certain how to talk about something as a social construct, but I thought it might be a really interesting topic. So let's do that. Let's talk about virginity. Let's talk about abstinence. Let's talk about what the Bible has to say about those things. Starting with the Old Testament. The Old Testament sort of sees virginity not as a new thing that it presents to the world and says, everybody should try to be a virgin until the time of their marriage, and this is why. When the Old Testament speaks about virginity, it really speaks about it as a social norm that is already in existence. So when, for example, in Deuteronomy and in Numbers and in Exodus it talks about virginity, it's really talking about how to deal with the various issues that a woman's virginity brings up, because it never talks about the importance of male virginity. It only ever upholds female virginity. And in the Old Testament, as I said, it only really discusses it from the perspective of some of the issues that might arise from it. It talks about a son should look for a virgin for a wife. It talks about if a man seduces a virgin, then he is to pay the bridal price to the father. It talks about how to deal with how a new husband is supposed to deal with a wife who he discovers is not a virgin, and how the parents can argue their case with the community and with that husband. The bottom line, in the Old Testament, it talks about virginity as a commodity. It's something of financial value. Now, I'm not an anthropologist, I'm not a sociologist, but as a student of history, I do understand that over the course of time, across the globe, many, many, many cultures have held up virginity as a commodity, because they've treated women as a commodity. A woman was something that was eventually sold off, and sold off through the bridal price. It was sold off through a dowry, that you would sell your daughter to another man, to a family, and they would pay you for her, and she would go off and be a wife. Virginity was something that was prized in those societies. In the New Testament, Paul talks about sexual immorality. He doesn't get into premarital sex all that much. For him, sex, though, is something that happens in a committed, loving relationship. A mutually loving, a mutually respectful, committed marriage, partnership. That's where sex takes place for Paul. Any sex outside of that particular construct is immoral. And it's also important for us to remember that Paul's not just talking about, basic guy meets girl, they sleep together kind of thing. Paul's talking about the stuff he's seeing in the Greco-Roman world. He's talking about men who are taking advantage of boys and girls, children. He's talking about men who are taking advantage of slaves. He's talking about men and women who are engaging in sex outside of their marriage. He's talking about some really dark stuff. It's not just premarital sex is bad. It's giving in to the temptations of the flesh outside of the marriage is problematic. It's troubling. Now, one of the things that was mentioned in those comments was a video that's out there done by a Christian organization whose ministry is to help young people abstain from sex until marriage, to really fortify that they should not have sex until they are married. Now, I'm not going to offer you a link, and I'm not going to offer you too much more information other than to talk about some of the basic premises of their video, because I find it vile. I think it's horrible. They rely on guilt and shame in order to sell their point. The bottom line is, what they say is, you should abstain from sex, you should remain a virgin, you should not engage in sexual activity, and then they equate it to being a used up piece of gum. And they say nobody wants to chew previously chewed gum. Nobody of value wants to be with somebody that's already been touched, that's already been known. Now, despite the methodology of that video, despite the ancient social construct of the virgin woman and her importance and how her chastity is of value and all the things that go with it, there is something to abstaining from sex outside of a committed partnership, outside of a marriage, outside of a deep, mutually loving, mutually respectful relationship. There is something of value to it. As a person who is married now, as a person who has been married in the past and has children from a previous marriage, as a person who has dated and has had sex outside of marriage, as a person who would go out with their buddies in order to pick up somebody for the night, you don't forget. My experience tells me that those people that I had those encounters with, they're still with me. When you engage like that with someone, emotional energy is shared. They are always with you from that time on. Now, they might be triggered by the weirdest moments at the weirdest times, but they are still around. Their energy is still around. Their memory is still around. Their ghost is still around. And when we find that relationship that we want to give everything we have to, when we find that relationship we want to offer our all to, those ghosts can get in the way. And so that new relationship, that relationship that you hope will last forever, that relationship you hope is between you and the other person, actually has other people involved as well. It has their energies, it has their memories, it has their ghosts circling, present. And for what it's worth, this is the conversation that I've had with my children when it comes to this. I've never gone down the path of shame and guilt. I've never gone down the path that says you must be a virgin, you must maintain your purity for marriage, but rather understand that when you are with someone, they are with you forever. And you will take them, you will take their memory, you will take their ghost, you will take their energy into your next relationship. And it will keep you in some ways fully being alone with that person you love. May the Lord bless you. May the Lord keep you. May the Lord's face be made to shine upon you and be gracious to you. May the Lord's countenance be lifted up to you. May you always know the peace of being in the Lord's presence. Amen.